Welcome to the Political Insider, and we have got our ultimate insider in studio today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
And that is Musi Maimane, leader of Build One South Africa. Musi, welcome. So let's get straight into it. Things have seemed to be a little bit quieter than usual, but we hear, and we've made quite a big thing about it, this national dialogue is our president's favorite new toy. Now, I thought the idea was bad enough, and then I heard the price. Okay, now just your view on firstly the national dialogue, and then some commentary about where 700 million rand gets spent.
Look, I was one of the first when at the IEC Results Center I said, bring the political leadership together to be able to chart a way forward. Countries that have won, you think about China. China was very effective at being able to lay out 10, 20, 30, 50-year plans. And so what's happening in China now is not an accident, it is by design. When you think about nations like Kenya's surpassing us at fintech and are growing an incredible economy because they launched Kenya 2030. Now, South Africa's big dilemma is that it started off with the National Planning Commission, which gave us the NDP in and of itself, and we didn't do anything about that. In fact, in the main, we missed all the targets. And so now we're arriving today with a president who seems very, very much committed to having a dialogue about everything. So here's the first issue. I think we need to take lead from the National Development Plan and say, where did we go wrong? What did we get right? How do we translate that to annual performance plans? What a national dialogue could potentially do, which I think is an important thing, is that leadership has to give to citizens of any country a sense of which it feels like, what does it mean for me to be a South African? Not just the color of my skin, but me as a citizen, as a person. What's my contribution to society? What's my contribution to the country? And how do I understand the country's problems and how do I contribute to that? So if it was treated like, if you like, a national strat plan for which all of us can contribute, then I think there's a lot of merit to it. What my deeper worry is that if it arrives just simply as a blank slate without a starting point, you cannot ask for an entire country to brainstorm. Because then it is the pooling effectively of, as others define brainstorming as the pooling of ignorance. Mm-hmm. What we desperately need is to take what was already a plan, say in the Government of National Unity, where exactly does South Africa need to go for South Africa 2040, South Africa 2050, and then say to citizens, you being a contributor, wherever you may come from, how do you get us there? And I think that would be a better starting point than just simply saying an open canvas, come and draw on it.
Yeah, I'm completely at a loss. I hear you, but there's something that's not going on over here, because you're going to have a lot of people there that come from a diverse sort of starting point. And so there's going to be a big talk shop.
That's not the only problem I think you'll foresee. One of the big worries I have about South Africa is its inability to learn. We feel that the failure of one policy is to be substituted by another policy. And we just keep going around these kind of activities. Now is a time actually for us to move from freedom rhetoric, CODESA type, let's get together and define that, actually to governing and a governance framework. And that requires deliberate leadership. It requires all sectors of society to come on board. And ultimately, what's become really tragic for me is that a year on into the GNU, there's still no plans being published. If I asked you today, how do you hold a minister from whichever party accountable? Accountable for what? What are they supposed to be doing? So they're just showing up to work and continuing with the policy of the last 30 years. And that's the net consequence, that the country has remained in a space where it's more of the same, but more of the same means we're getting worse, not better.
Okay, we're going to get into the GNU in a second, but just to close this thing off with the national dialogue, do you as a parliamentarian and the leader of a party, and you've been there before, is this not an ultimate slap in the face of Parliament? That you've got Parliament that are ostensibly there to have these discussions and to hammer out division. Is the national dialogue not saying, you guys aren't good enough. I'm going to go outside and go get somebody who climbed Mount Everest or somebody who coaches the female football team to tell us what to do.
I think it's a failure of the executive, and sure, by extension, members of parliament should contribute to that. But there's been an exercise that's been done before. President Kgalema Motlanthe undertook what was called the high-level panel report, went across various sectors of society to garner a view about where are we on water, where are we on electricity, where are we on all of these issues, produced an incredible report, I thought, on land and land reform and measurements. What did government do with it? It did exactly the same thing as it did with the state capture report. File it, and it's great. And then we can move on. So it's an indictment on the current political leadership in its main, in that we keep having these reviews, and then once we're done with them, we file them and do nothing about it. And my biggest fear for the national dialogue is not just its tag as its price tag, it's also that you could also produce another plan that no one does anything in an incapable state. But on the price tag issue, I know we're going to talk about it, but 700 million rands, the government does not have 700 million rands. And it's certainly, I think, no one has been able to demonstrate to me how exactly you intend on spending that 700 million rands. I think that the way we have dialogue in this country is that we're able to have it in our provinces, in our cities, and there is a way in which you could do that exercise without having to run up a cost tag of 700 million rands. And if the presidency, which is in vote 1 of the budget, as I chair the budget committee, doesn't have 700 million rands, were we to make a special appropriation for that, something else needs to give way. So you must then say it's 700 million rands to national dialogue and to all sorts of things that happen. It means less teachers, less nurses, less policemen. So let's make decisions knowing what the other consequences are.
Yeah, because the tone deafness is staggering, especially when it comes to the announcement that we have a shortage, unfilled teaching posts of 29,292 teachers in South Africa.
It's not just that. It's also the ratio of doctors to patients. South Africa, the international benchmark is somewhere between 1 to 1,000. We're sitting at 1 to 3,000. So our doctors are overworked in the system. So if you're speaking to anybody that want to get more doctors into the system, you're speaking to teachers. The net consequence of teacher shortage means that the ratio of classrooms, so in higher income schools, generally works out to 1:34. In South Africa, in certain schools, that number could be 1 to 40, 45, 50, which means that the quality of education, particularly if you're poor in this country, becomes progressively worse. But here's where I even worry. I mean, you don't have to retell the Washington drama that took place at the White House. But the one thing you should concern yourself with is the fact that walking away from that, it was clear South Africa has got a real murder problem. It's not just in the farm, it's everywhere. And so if you've got 75 people or just thereabouts dying every day, you know, I did this exercise. I thought, what would the number of people who died last year, if you took all of their coffins and lined them up, what would be the distance? And it actually works out. It would be the exact distance between the president's house in Hyde Park and the president's office in Pretoria. You lined up the coffins from just last year, 1 year. That's the trip. So I guess to the president, every time you do that route, remind yourself that if the people who had died in this country were to be lined up, that's the distance. The pain behind that is that when you look at the policing budget, 81% of it is spent on personnel. So sure, policing is about manpower, but it does mean that in the main, take 700 million, give it to that. It's less policemen, it's less technology, it's less vehicles, and it's less specialization of detectives. So I think South Africa, a dialogue is but one thing. Choices are going to be the next hard thing, and you can't get the whole country to make choices. The only choice a country makes is when it goes to vote to say, you are empowered by us to go make the choices. And so when political leadership says, we're throwing the ball back at you, it is a failure of that political leadership.
Just you mentioned that you head up the budget committee on this, the budget committee. It's going to be a fight, isn't it? I can't wait to get to the political insider when they come with this bill to you.
Yes, certainly. And I'm interested to see how they're going to appropriate it, because either they get a special bill, which they'd have to come to the committee to ask for, or they can change a program from one department to another that sits within the presidency. And I'm not sure. I think that would constitute more than 8% of the total presidency's budget, in which case you'd still need parliamentary permission, which has to come to our committee.
Okay, well, that's more on this coming. We spoke about the GNU. If this idea of a national dialogue is a slap in the face in Parliament, it seems to be the ultimate kick in the nuts to the GNU, can't put it any other way, where there seems to be no dialogue at all between the GNU partners.
Well, there seems to be no plan. And I think I might have alluded to this earlier. South Africa's big crisis is the fact that its economy is growing at less than 1%. Since the GNU has taken place, it was 0.6% last year, 0.1% the first quarter of this year, and the next quarter is going to be round about the same place, maybe 0.5 or so, given the tariffs all over the world. So, if that was your organizing problem, isn't it incumbent upon the GNU to say, we didn't just get elected to elect a position of the president and ourselves to get positions in ministry? We should be obsessed every day with going, how do we grow the economy and create more jobs? That should be the only question. And therefore, in the absence of that, you end up with a number of problems. Firstly, you have budget problems, as you saw, version 1, version 2, version 3. That is a symptom of the fact that we don't know what our priorities are. So when somebody says there must be a tax hike, someone says there must be ports being allocated here, all of that scrambled egg means you have a group of people who don't have a consolidated plan around. Because if they did, then the short answer should have been, if you have a consolidated plan and you are clear about emanating from that plan, here are the priorities, you immediately then go, here are the funding needs, and then here's how we raise the revenue, and that's the budget. But in the absence of that, you're going to have the scramble. And to be fair to them, there's one constitutional, if you like, impediment. And this is that when a coalition is put together in this country, the constitution only gives you 12 days to say, in those 12 days, you got to have a government. And so they didn't use those 12 days to come up with a plan. They used those 12 days to say, from the statement of intent, which was largely an ANC document, how do we get more people on board? I am calling, even now, more than a national dialogue and all of that, get the 10 parties together, draft a plan, agree on what funding looks like, and then go from there. Because if you don't have a plan, well, what if the Minister of Education says, I think actually what we should do is scrap matric? What's to stop her from doing that? Or if the Minister of DTIC makes a different decision, or of land. If all of these parties who have got all their ideological inferences come into the room and says, we will do what we feel like doing on that basis, you are going to end up not only with a citizenry that is frustrated, you are going to end up with a society that is misled. And I think now more than ever, you've got to be able to come up with a plan so that you are able to also hold people accountable. I've asked the presidency about performance plans of ministers. They don't have them, because on what basis are you measuring someone? They can come to portfolio committees to come and account. All they can account on are annual performance plans from the previous administration and whatever the bureaucrats tell them. There's no sense upon which I'm getting an impression that someone could go into the room and say, Cabinet collectively has agreed to do the following things because here's the plan we're dealing with, and off we go. The medium-term development plan, that's got 31 priorities within it. If everything is a priority, we all know nothing is. So in truth, I think do us all a favor. Let's lock up the GNU in one room, let them devise a plan, and let Parliament do the job of holding them accountable to that plan. In the absence of that, I think that we're going to be, as the young people say, just there for vibes.
Yeah, and just lastly, do you see this even, is this just going to muddle along to the next election?
It certainly won't, because I think, like most things in life, there's consequences. And what we've seen all over the world about coalitions is that your constituency looks for certain wins, that looks for certain outcomes. And here, I think we need to think carefully about what the local government elections are going to be. We're living in a country at the moment that, on one level, it may look up and see and say, oh, well, the parties are working together. But beyond working together, they're going to start to ask, why do we have no jobs? Why are cities falling apart? Why is this revolving door of leadership and multiple positions? And I worry that certain parties will be punished by being in the GNU, and I worry that certain parties may benefit if they're able to create wins that are seen by their constituents as that. If I had a magic wand, Mike, I certainly think that we have to answer quickly as a society. What is the alternative plan? So if you said to me, post this national dialogue or whatever, or post the GNU, South Africa, I hope we get to a point where we can make a choice between saying parties on this side think like this and they are coalescent on that plan. Parties on another side think like that and they are coalescent on this plan. And so how do we do it? This romantic feeling that people have that suddenly, as certain parties have entered the GNU, that by some odd reason they're able to convert a 40% party or a historical party like the ANC quickly to believe, I think sometimes is overbaked. And a year on, I'm seeing that perhaps maybe there isn't too much to expect from a change point of view. So I want it to succeed, but it has to succeed against the plan.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's why it's the Political Insider. Musi, thank you so much for coming past. To everybody that enjoyed the Political Insider, subscribe to the channel. It's going along nicely, and we'll see you again, Musi, probably online, but thanks for coming past today.
I look forward to seeing you.